And coming into this one, I was 0-3 going to games, having yet to see my first win in person. And I don't know if you can tell by the sound of my voice, but this ended up being a pretty exciting game, and spoiler alert, they won. What's cracking, everybody, and welcome back to Kraken R&R for yet another Seattle Kraken win. And once again, it comes against one of the best teams in the NHL, in the Edmonton Oilers, and two of the best point scorers in the entire league, in Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl, as the Kraken end up pulling this one off 4-3. Yeah, there's not much left in there. Like I said before, going to this game, I had yet to see the Kraken win, and the last game I had gone to was that game against Colorado that launched this whole playing good thing the Kraken have been trying, which I'm a big fan of, by the way, but still being 0-3 going to games, and while I might not call myself superstitious, I'm a little stitious, and sure, I was probably going to see a win eventually. I didn't necessarily expect it to come against a team like the Oilers. I mean, maybe I should have expected it, or at least given them more credit going in than I was, considering coming into this game they were 4-1-1 since that game against Colorado, already having beaten some of the league's best teams in DC, Carolina, and Florida, which we've already talked about and have been very happy about. That having been said, by the time we got to look at the lineup, I think I could be forgiven for being a little apprehensive about how this game was going to go, considering the opponent and the fact that the Kraken were still going to be without Jordan Eberle, Jaden Schwartz, as well as Calle Jarnkrok. And also Will Borgen, but he actually ended up being a healthy scratch tonight and could have played. They just decided to bench him, which we could complain about, but tonight just doesn't feel like the night. And speaking of being at the game, tonight was also the first night that I gave Shaq's Chicken Place a chance, and I have to say, the sandwich was actually pretty good. The fries, really not so much. Some of the worst fries I've probably ever had, but again, the sandwich was pretty good, and considering how the game ended up going, probably going to have a lot more of those sandwiches for the near future when I go to games. Again, little stitious. Getting to the game though, if any of the rest of you were also at the game, I hope you weren't late to your seats, because the Kraken win the faceoff, and right away it's Donskoy to Donato! Big save made by Skinner to keep the Kraken off the board. I mean, could you imagine if they had scored that early on? Well, if you are watching this game, you probably can, because just seconds later, the Kraken get a 3-on-2 with Donato carrying the puck down ice, who passes through Donskoy to Gord, and he buries it to give the Kraken the 1-0 lead within the first minute. It really does feel good for the Kraken to finally be getting these fast starts, rather than seeing it go the other way. And I gotta say, even if it doesn't survive Eberle, Schwartz, and Jarnkrok eventually coming back, this Gord, Donskoy, Donato line has been really fun to watch over these last two games. Coming off the early goal, Edmonton does start to get a little pressure and control, which makes me glad we have a 1-goal buffer, but Seattle pushes right back with even more chances and more pressure on the other end, eventually with a shot advantage of 8-3 over the Oilers, really controlling this game well out of the gates, right up until they send Edmonton to the power play with the former Oiler and Larson headed to the box. And if there's one key to beating the Oilers, it's to not let them get on the power play. And 30 seconds into it, they show why. Nugent Hopkins and McDavid play catch on one side of the ice, which draws all of the Kraken defensive attention away from the other side, which is fine. The only guy that's over there is just the NHL's leading goal scorer and only guy with 20 goals in the entire league right now, Leon Draisaitl. Nugent Hopkins finds him wide open, and as 20 goals already at this point in the season might suggest, he doesn't miss. Coming out of that power play, which the Oilers made short work of, they continue to get pressure and shots off on net, which thanks in large part to Grubauer does not lead to a 2-1 lead for the Oilers, and a few minutes later when the puck does eventually find the back of a net, it's the Oilers' net. It's a nice little rotating passing play between Donskoy and McCann that eventually finds Larson on the other side, who's able to walk it in blocker side and find the net against his old team, and also make up for that goal that was scored on the power play with him in the box. And speaking of rotating, the whole thing was set up by Donskoy showing off his hands with a spin move that makes a couple of defenders look silly for a moment before one of them's able to recover and actually make a pretty nice play on the puck. It does still stay on Donskoy's stick. He carries it with the backhand until he can eventually pass it off to McCann rotating behind the net, and then, as we know, Larson finishes it off with the goal. And speaking as someone who's now played hockey for a grand total of 2 years, how players are able to do spin moves on the ice continues to baffle me, much less while keeping the puck on your stick and also being defended by an NHL defenseman. It doesn't always work out well, as Leafs fans know from the playoffs, but it's still impressive when you see it. For Donskoy, this play does earn him his 12th assist on the season with the Larson goal, which seemed like a fair amount, up until I looked at the scoring summary for the Oilers' power play goal and noticed that that was McDavid's 26th assist. Goodness. As we near the end of what has been a really good first period for the Kraken, not just looking competitive against the Oilers, but actually holding a 2-1 lead, they once again send the Oilers to the power play. What did we just talk about? This is the one thing you cannot do against this team. Fortunately for the Kraken, there's more than one way to kill a penalty. There's playing defense and trying to clear the puck when you can, which clearly didn't work all that well for them the first time. And then there's drawing a penalty of your own to even things up, which is what they do this time around. That works like a charm, and the Kraken get to the end of the period still up 2-1. And before I forget, sometime in the first period, I think a little bit after the Larson goal, a puck ends up going into the Seattle bench and catching Paul McFarland, one of the Seattle assistant coaches, in the face and drawing blood. Of course, being the true hockey guy that he is, it doesn't seem to faze him all that much. I mean, my guy still has his tablet out looking at it, trying to review plays, while the team doctors are attending to his face. After the game, Haxtell would throw in that he was glad McFarland was there to block it because he didn't see it coming whatsoever, and if it hadn't hit McFarland, it probably would have caught him. The second period gets off to a bit of a slow start for the Kraken after the remaining bit of 4-on-4 and small Kraken power play left over from the first, but they do get momentum back and start pouring on the pressure and shots off on net against Edmonton through a power play of their own that doesn't end up converting. And then after Seattle has seemingly completely controlled the game for the last 6 to 8 minutes, Edmonton does this annoying thing that they tend to do where, after having been pinned into their own end for an extended period of time, the first chance they get going the other way, they make count. Bouchard gets an unchallenged shot off at the net that misses it completely, but the Oilers are able to recover, get it back to him. His second unchallenged shot, I think, ends up going off of Dunn a little bit. Either way, it finds the back of the net with Grubauer maybe a little out of position, but I'm not going to nitpick too much as he had a fantastic game. And just like that, we're tied at 2. Where it would not stay for long is just 5 minutes later, Sheahan forces a turnover as the Oilers try to exit their end of the ice, and he gets the puck to Blackwell off of Lind, who splits the defense, drives to the net, puts it on the backhand and into the back of the net to regain the lead for the Kraken. It's now 3-2. And for Lind, although it's maybe a soft assist as he barely touches the puck on its way to Blackwell, it's an important little tap that he gives it as it earns him his first NHL point. Meanwhile, with Sheahan, it has to be said he's played pretty well since coming back from the AHL, and if this team can stay healthy while they get guys back from injury, he's inevitably going to give them a hard decision to make when time comes to decide whether or not to try to waive him and get him back to the AHL. And honestly, if they do waive him, I'm not sure he's going to clear waivers a second time. And really, as a whole, with this fourth line tonight, all three of them getting a point on this Blackwell goal, after having been pretty much invisible in the Detroit game, in part due to low amounts of ice time, they really made a difference in this one against the Oilers. Not just getting on the scoreboard here, again, Blackwell scoring, but also just every time they were out on the ice, they really kept the Oilers from just walking them down, which, to be honest, I was kind of afraid was going to happen considering the forward talent that they were going to be facing. And we'll just skip right over Blackwell almost falling on the celly as he gets maybe a little overexcited, crashing into the boards. Next up, it's the Wennberg line's chance to get on the board, and less than 3 minutes later, they do so! It's Wennberg himself playing with the puck for a little bit in the corner before sending it cross-ice to Alexiak up in the corner, who thinks about it for a second, then sends it right back to Wennberg, who's able to snap it home for the goal to make it 4-2 Kraken. At first, it seems like this one was tipped in by Johansson, who was standing in front of the net with his stick at the ready, and while that probably is where Wennberg was aiming, the puck ends up going off of Skinner's skate just before it gets to Johansson's stick and into the back of the net with the same result, except for the goal scorer being Wennberg instead of Johansson. And I doubt either one of them care all that much, because either way, the Kraken now have a 2-goal lead and are able to carry this momentum into the end of the second period. Although that momentum doesn't lead to a 5th goal before the end of the period, it does get them through another Oilers power play at the very end of the period, which definitely wasn't nervous about at all. After yet another fantastic second period by the Kraken, in the third, it became obvious pretty quick, even with a 2-goal lead, that this was going to be 15 minutes of testing the general heart health of the Kraken fanbase. The strategy from the Oilers was also pretty clear from the jump, as they had McDavid and Draisaitl out on the same line, and then continued to roll them out pretty much every other shift with basically whoever's legs were freshest. Even though they are two of the best players in the world, if not currently the two best, this is obviously not a sustainable strategy in the long term, but over one period, it gives a feeling of the Oilers having a 15-minute power play, especially with the Kraken trying to ice this one defensively. Fortunately, thanks in large part to Grubauer going into brick wall mode, the Kraken are able to survive the first half of the period up until they finally get a power play about halfway through. It turns out to be another one of these Kraken power plays that takes quite a while to get going, but once it does, it creates a very good scoring chance, and in this case, about as good of a chance as you're gonna get, with Geeky all alone in front of the net. A great pass from behind it gets to him, and he gets absolutely robbed by Skinner. Up until this point, Skinner had really not had a particularly fantastic game, but once again, it has to be said, he no question takes one off of the board here, keeping this game still within reach for the Oilers, and at this point, this is definitely the save of the game. Although, it doesn't end up staying that way. So the Kraken power play is killed off successfully, with this chance from Geeky coming in the last few seconds of it, and then going right back the other way. McDavid uses his otherworldly speed, which, having now seen it in person, can confirm he is a very fast man on skates, to create a play for Edmonton. It's Bouchard taking a shot off on net, which sees a fantastic eye-hand coordination play from McDavid drifting back in front of the net to tip it through the 5-hole of Grubauer and into the net to make it 4-3. Oh boy. Off the ensuing faceoff, Seattle's finally able to get a good scoring chance 5-on-5 that takes another big Skinner save to keep out of the net. And then going right back the other way, it's Tyson Barrie putting everything he has into a shot from the blue line that goes wide of Grubauer's glove and wide of the net, but it bounces off the end boards right to Puljujarvi, who's in front of an open net. And the game's tied, isn't it? What? No, Grubauer made the save! Grubauer's able to dive backwards and actually, it was on the other side, so he dives backwards and he's able to get his glove on the puck, and also Puljujarvi's stick, who cannot believe that Grubauer is able to keep this one out of the net. It's absolutely the save of the game, and for Grubauer, easily the save of the year for him so far. And that's not to say that he hasn't had some good ones, but to keep this one out of the net, especially considering it would have been the tying goal in the last minutes of the game, this is an absolute beauty of a save. The Kraken do get on another power play, but it has to be said, this power play really just felt like they were using it as 2 free minutes of killed time towards the end of the game, and didn't end up really making much of it offensively. Which, I mean, some of it was definitely Edmonton just doing a good job on the kill with aggressive forechecking, but it did still feel like a bit of a wasted opportunity for Seattle that they might wish that they had back, especially when, with a minute and a half left in the game, now with the goalie pulled and a 6-on-5 advantage for the Oilers, that 6-on-5 turns into a 6-on-4 as Larson goes to the box again. And speaking of which, back in the first intermission after the first period, Larson was the guy that they pulled aside to do an interview of. After all, he had just scored a goal against his old team, so it makes sense. And those interviews rarely yield much of anything interesting, and Larson certainly isn't the most interesting interview. But in that interview, he did correctly point out, with a bit of a sheepish grin on his face, considering he had gotten penalized in the first period, which led to that power play goal for the Oilers, that the key for Seattle was going to be staying out of the penalty box against such a dangerous power play that the Oilers have. So why can't you just listen to your own advice? So, here we are, with a 1-goal lead against the Edmonton Oilers, who have a 2-man advantage for a minute and a half. Oh goodness. I mean, I get that the Seahawks aren't playing stressful games anymore with the way their season's going, but that wasn't an invitation for the Kraken to start. But somehow, Lord have mercy, the Kraken managed to survive for that minute and a half, with Tanev missing an open net, to end up holding on and winning this game 4-3. And what a game it was. And for my money, easily the best game of the season. I mean, was it the most complete, well, all-around played game by the Kraken? maybe not. The Florida game certainly comes to mind as far as that's concerned, or maybe the one against DC. But as far as entertainment value is concerned, yeah, this one definitely had it. Throwing out the salmon for the Kraken at the end of the game, which was fun to see for the first time in person, was Wemberg getting the first star of the game, and Larson getting the third star, even with 2 penalties, one of which was costly on the scoreboard, and the other one was costly for the overall life expectancy of Kraken fans everywhere. It still makes sense considering he does score a goal against his old team and all that, but getting robbed here is the man who robbed the Oilers of the win, that being Philip Grubauer. Getting the second star was Evan Bouchard for the Oilers, which makes sense. He definitely had a very good game, and if you're going to give it to somebody who isn't named Draisaitl or McDavid, he was certainly the pick. For the Kraken, the win not only makes them 5-1-1 over the last 7 since that 6-game losing streak, but also gives them a 4th consecutive game scoring points, and gives them their first in-division win this season, or, well, ever. It also is the Oilers' first division loss of the season, which is kind of fun. And Florida, their first home loss, the Oilers, their first division loss, and the Kraken just continued their rampage through the NHL's best teams. The team will now finally get a chance to have 2 days off in a row for the first time in a while, which hopefully they can use to get a little bit healthier. Obviously, getting Eberle and Schwartz back would be nice, or Yarncroke off the IR, as well as getting Gio off of the COVID-19 list, where he's now been for a while. And you know what? If they can beat the Oilers without their 2 leading point scorers at this point in the season and their captain, then who knows what they can do once they get those guys back playing the way that they have been. But with that, it's party time down in the comments section. And for me, it's late now recording this video, so if you have made it to this point, thank you very much for watching. If you did like or enjoy it, there are buttons for that kind of stuff down below as well that I would appreciate you using to help support the channel. And until next time, stay safe out there, be good to each other, and go Kraken!